candidates, I think you heard, as I did, the audience reaction to Dr. Basu's comment that if I'm in permitting services and I've given someone the thumbs down or sent them back for more paperwork, whatever, that's been a good day. Again, I don't embrace, I don't endorse, but I thought the reaction in the room from people who've had a lot more experience in this area than me, I thought it was a notable reaction. So to the extent that there's a perception and or reality out there, maybe commingled with something I just heard in conversation and leading up to today, that the county sort of tolerates the business community but doesn't really embrace it, what actions do you take, what signals do you send if you are the next county executive in Montgomery County to address this issue? Mr. Elrich.
So the regulatory environment in DPS, and I assume that's pretty much what you're talking about, is largely dictated by building codes. Since Diane Schwartz-Jones has been there, she has made major changes at the direction of the county executive in the time it takes to get permits done, in the whole process is in there so people don't spend as much time. When I heard from Brian Folger about your attenuator issue, and other people in the county came to me about fire issues with the fire inspector in the building process, I went to Ike and said, you've got to take the fire inspector out of the inspection process, because the building code is the fire code. So if a builder builds to the building code and the building inspector comes in and says, your building's okay, do close in, you're done, you should be done. The fire inspector shouldn't come after that process and say, I don't like this. And sometimes it's not even, it wasn't built to code, but it was, I don't like this. And then go back and revisit and say, you need to do this again. I took the fire inspector out of that process after examining what I had brought to him and said, you're right, we shouldn't be doing this. Now, I think we ought to be looking at code requirements. I think there are things in the code that don't necessarily make sense, particularly as people try to transition a building from a current use to a future use. And that's where I hear people coming and saying all the time, it cost me $100,000 to do fit out. It shouldn't cost $100,000 to do fit out. I want to work at individual code items, review them, see what we need to do at the point that a building's being built new, and what do you need to do when you're going through successive occupancies.
Mr. Blair.
Just a real quick story. So when we outgrew our headquarters, Fairfax County tried to get us to move over there. They dedicated personnel to make sure we wouldn't have any problems with permitting and inspection. A few weeks later, when we met with Montgomery County, the word we got was, you'll need to hire a permit facilitator company to help you get through this process. So we've got to change the game. What can the county government do? We've got to lead by example. And one of the things that I want to do is buy local. We've got to buy local. It's the easiest thing that our government can do. If you were to come to my campaign headquarters, you'd see a big shelving unit, and we've got virtually all the products that are made in Montgomery County. Des Moines, Iowa did a study. They found it's about 2/3 the size of our county. If they bought 5% more local, they could generate $1 billion of economic opportunity, 6,500 jobs. So we got to all be buying from each other, right? And so we've got to be promoting our own businesses, and our government should be buying our products. There's a small business in Bethesda. It's a salad dressing company. It's called Dress It Up Dressing. And so Sophia Maroon, who owns that company, so once she has to ship it to Wisconsin to get it bottled, because we don't have a co-packaging facility here, we should do that. We should invest in co-packaging facilities, not just for her business, but other businesses. And then we should be buying it as a government, right? It'll be in my cafeteria as your county executive if you come there. And then we should all be promoting our businesses, because that's an easy way to start generating economic opportunity.
Councilman Berliner.
Who's next?
Mr. Berliner. Thank you.
So I know Diane Schwartz-Jones, who is our head of DPS, just loves this conversation, don't you, Diane? And it's a hard conversation. So all of us hear these apocryphal stories. I'll share one I heard from the faith community, somebody building a church. They said to me, Councilmember Berliner, let me just share what our experience was. And here was one of the stories that he shared that stuck with me. We had to prove that a major state highway was available to the public. Take that in. They had to prove that Route 28 was a public access road. And they had to go get state certification to prove it. It cost an extra month. It didn't cost that much money, but it was emblematic of something that just cannot happen. I had lunch with a law firm the other day that explained how it took them forever to get their permits. So it is something that we need to take serious. It is something that I would do on the first day of becoming county executive, is to actually be at our permitting offices and see for myself what happens when people walk in that door, because it ought to be so easy. We do need to make it easy for businesses to succeed in our county. We need to be your friend, not your foe. We need to be your ally, not your obstacle. That is what I would seek to be as your county executive.
Mayor Rose-Krasner?
I think it's important to point out that we are not the only jurisdiction that has permitting issues and planning issues. If I actually have looked at this somewhat extensively, and other jurisdictions come under the same complaints. I have a very funny video from Lake County, Illinois, where they actually made some major revisions to their permitting process, and they had a young man show before where it took him days and days, and he was running from place to place, and then they fixed it, and he went in, and they handed him his permit, and he almost died of the shock. So we're not alone in having permitting issues, but we also have issues in terms of, for one thing, I would like to look at whether our permitting department should be an enterprise department, because they have to keep raising the price of the fees to cover their costs. So either the costs are too high, or we need to come up with a way to help businesses who come in. I met recently, and I'm going to take this back to planning, I met recently with the farmers, and they were saying one of them was saying they wanted to open a cidery. And that if they had a barn on site, they didn't have to go through the subdivision process. But if they didn't have a barn on the site and needed to build one, that they were going to have to go through the subdivision process, and it was going to cost them $130,000 to do so. That is simply unacceptable. We keep kicking ourselves to keep us from really being, we say we want to be business friendly, and then we keep doing things that mean we are not. As your county executive, I would really like to change the whole mentality of the way we do business.
Councilman Leventhal?
Well, it sounds like we all have stories of odd outcomes in the planning and permitting process. My favorite has to do with historic preservation. In the Fed committee, we were approached by the owner of a farm who was being told by the planning department, historic preservation, that it had to retain a 200-year-old tobacco shed, which was falling down at a cost of $110,000. But I assure you, we wouldn't want to have a tobacco shed today in Montgomery County. We don't want to encourage the tobacco industry today. And ultimately, the Fed committee said, look, just take a picture of the tobacco shed, and you can have a museum that'll commemorate the fact that we used to grow tobacco in this county. Thank God we don't do it anymore. And that was a planning department rule. The number one source of complaints I get from businesses is about the Department of Permitting Services. The number two is about the planning department. Nobody likes to deal with bureaucracy. We should make every effort to streamline. One thing we've done, as Roger mentioned, is that we're co-locating DPS and DEP and Park and Planning in a single location. So one of the frustrations that applicants and attorneys and landowners and investors have had is they have to go from point A to point B to point C. Now it'll all happen in downtown Wheaton, and by the way, they can get a bite to eat and they can get a haircut and help generate the private economy there. So again, I want a culture of customer service. Public employees work for you. I work for you. It's an honor to be of service to you, and I will inspire and motivate our workforce to make sure that they never forget who they work for, that the taxpayers of Montgomery County pay their salary, and that the purpose of life is service to others. And that is the culture of customer service that I will instill in every department under my supervision as county executive, and I'll try to expand it to the planning department, which is a source of a lot of complaints over the last decade, and to the school system.
Delegate Frick?
Well, I think we do have a lot of challenges with this, and it pervades permitting services, park and planning, any number of places. And I do think the number one challenge for us is culture. It is a culture of no. It is a culture of empowering the bureaucrat and the rules and the technical adherence to those rules, and not a culture of service. Now, Councilmember Leventhal just said that. He's been there 16 years. right? I mean, I think we need someone coming from the outside that's going to dynamically change that culture. Your business folks, we often have chief culture officers, right? Marriott has one, to create from the top down a culture that says we are not here to say no to things that are wrong. We're here to say yes to the things that are right and to facilitate those good outcomes. And I strongly believe in that. I really do want to touch on this issue of the Department of Liquor Control, because this is one of the most frustrating areas for our small businesses. Our restaurants have been dealing for years and years with a department, as you know, Montgomery County is the only county in the entire country that has the exclusive monopoly distributorship for all beer, wine, and spirits. And we are not doing a good job. We are not delivering things on time. We are not delivering the correct answers. And yet, when we have tried to make this change, when the restaurants begged for the difference, our council said no. Our council, literally at a debate, one of the council members said to me, it's all about the money. What kind of culture do we have where the biggest issue for that leader is extracting money from our small businesses rather than serving them?